Would it be a best practice to incorporate the customs and duty charges in the e-commerce sort of shopping cart so that customers know what they're going to end up as a total bottom line?
They can do that, and there are companies that will facilitate that for you. For the shipper to do it themselves is really difficult. I mean, you need to know the duty rate by country and then by item, and the percentages are going to vary depending on, it could be different for every single SKU that you sell. So it'd be really difficult to maintain that kind of a database. There are companies that have software programs that will do what's called harmonize the product on the fly and calculate the duty and tax rate as the order's being placed. But from my experience, lower value items, and I mean lower value is under a couple $100, it's probably not worth it because that becomes an expensive process for the shipper. Okay. They're paying per transaction to have that calculation done. To Mary's point about the 70% of rejections are due to duty and tax issues, that's probably true. I'm sure it is. But I wonder how many pieces out of 100 are rejected at all, and then the 70% may become a small number. If you ship 100 parcels and 5 get rejected, and 70% of that 5 is because of customs, we're talking 3. So it's really not. It depends on how you position it. I'm not sure that it's that big an issue. We have customers that ship, I'd say 98% of them ship delivery duty unpaid, meaning it's the consumer's responsibility, and it does happen. Stuff gets rejected, but it doesn't seem to be an overwhelming problem. Right. Nobody's looking for lots of fixes.
Yeah, this is another it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're shipping, it depends on how much the person wants it, depends on where it's going.
And again, just the fact that the person purchased it from an international website, I think they're generally aware of the fact that there could be duties and taxes applied to the item.
So let's talk a little bit about knowing the importance of address quality in terms of deliverability and understanding that some of the pieces are going to get rejected and come back for address quality, some will be related to duty issues. What is the path? How does this work? When you mail out a parcel for a customer and it comes back, does it come back to you and your company, Mark?
It depends on how it's mailed. It depends. If we mail it through the USPS, and the return address is on the piece and it's accurate, it'll come back to the customer very often. If it's mailed through a third party, then it'll come back to the shipper, and oftentimes that's us. So it really depends on how you're sending it.
And is that true if it's a letter or a parcel?
Letters, not so much. I mean, the foreign posts are not real keen on sending back mail. It costs them money to do it, and somebody's going to have to pay for that. So when you're talking just regular mail, direct mail, catalogs, magazines, more often than that, a lot of that stuff probably just gets abandoned. It's not worth it for them to send it back.
As we're discussing this, one of the things that comes to mind is even if an address at the point of capture or the point of validation comes back as flagged as potentially undeliverable, it's really not a point where you should necessarily reject it. If it comes back definitively undeliverable, then you should. But there are some that are in the gray area where it comes down to country-specific idiosyncrasies, and it comes down to in some northern, less developed areas of countries, more rural areas, where the letter carrier knows how to get a particular parcel or letter to the endpoint, the customer. So it's really, that's when customer service kicks in for a given company, where they need to determine, do we call this individual to validate that his actual address is correct? So you flag the address and then act accordingly. Whether you mail or ship that product is the decision of the business. And if it's in the gray area, then investigate it so you don't incur the cost of it being either returned or not delivered altogether. So it's not, there's gray areas that you need to look further into.
Well, I think there's one more point also, and if you want to get the returned mail back, and it is important, like Marty's saying, otherwise you really can't tell if it's good, then you need to spend a little money and use the right service. So there are services that USPS provides, IPA for example, that does return mail. And it returns it very, very efficiently and very, very quickly. So if that's really a concern, then use that level service at the front end. You're going to pay a little more, but you're going to get the returns back without having to pay for them.
All of the USPS international letter services offer a free return of undeliverables. So and I agree with Mark, the posts do try to their best ability to deliver items, because there is time and effort and expense for them to return it. If they truly can't deliver it, there is a process for it to be returned to the U.S. And because with USPS International Mail, the mail pieces do have the U.S. return address,
Right.
the piece does come back directly to that sender. Some of the other services offered by other postal administrations use a return address in another country. So the piece from the delivering destination country goes back to an address in a second country, and then it has to come back to the sender. It's much more convoluted. Whereas with the USPS, you've got that return address right on the mail piece, no question about it. That's where it's going to come back to.
In the U.S., we're very much accustomed to the USPS providing electronic address information back to the user and the sender. Are there any countries that do that outside the U.S.? Mary's just shaking her head. Nobody's there yet.
No, nobody's doing it internationally. I know there's talk about doing it in the UK, in France. Australia's talking about it, but they're talking about doing it domestically, as the USPS does it here domestically.
Right.
So
I'm not aware of what other countries are doing in that regard.
And the USPS doesn't provide the information electronically to the other countries today, right?
No.
Right. So that's a step in the future direction that could make e-commerce get a feedback loop faster. That could be useful in terms of managing the address, because if we all assume we have the right address and it's critical to delivery, but we don't always get the feedback about it not being a valid address, it's not a good way to maintain and grow the business for the future. And customers are expecting immediate gratification as it relates to ordering something on the web and getting it delivered.
Correct.
Yeah. So what other tips or tricks might you suggest to folks that are just getting into the global business? We'll just go one round down.
Well, I'd say the best thing that you can do is just get beyond some of the hesitation that people have had for many years about customs and mail and things like that. Their rules and regulations are much more complicated now than they have been, but there are a lot of good service providers out there that can help you get it done as well. Just worry about taking the orders and collecting the money. Even that's gotten a lot easier because of the web, and let the service providers take care of the rest for you.
I would suggest that do your homework and stand on the shoulders of those that have been there before you. There's a lot of subject matter expertise to tap into. Doing your homework up front will save you a lot of cost and pain points later on. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies at a country-specific level. An example is in South Korea, by including a phone number on the piece of mail or parcel that's being delivered, it increases the likelihood of deliverability just due to the complexities of the system in South Korea. And the letter carriers have mobile phones. If they can't find the place, they'll call. So it helps assure deliverability. So speak to people who have been there ahead of you, and less anguish at the back end.
I'd say it's easier than it sounds when we sit up here discussing what can go wrong and what the problems might be. So jump in, and there are plenty of people you can talk to. Try talking to people who are already doing it. They'll be very helpful.
Yeah, and I would echo Mark's comment that, it is somewhat more complex, but it's really not impossible to do. I mean, I think it's a great way for companies to expand their businesses. I mean, it truly is a worldwide web, and so I think customers would be wise to embrace global business, global opportunities. And it's really doable. Yeah, there may be a few more issues that you need to be aware of, but it's certainly not impossible.
Thank you for all your positivity and participation in today's panel discussion. I'll just quickly ask if there's any questions from the audience that we haven't addressed as of yet. And if not, oh yes, you have one? Can't hear you at all. 1 second, please. Okay, ask your question.
Yeah, I know there is a big effort for a universal standard for address. I want to know what is going on about that. How far are we for having some kind of a universal standard for addressing? And what are we doing for the future?
Okay, thanks for your question. Who wants to take the first chance of answering?
First of all, address standards are country by country, so there's no universal standard. The US has a standard, Canada has a standard, Mexico has a standard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The UPU, which is the Universal Postal Union, which oversees the international process of mail, not the processing, but literally the process of moving it, is working on address standards. It's standard S42, and it will be adopted as an ISO standard probably within the next 2 years. There will be a lot more information, but it's a country-by-country process, and it's moving slowly.
But it is a standard. How many countries are already on the S42 standard? Over 30?
Yeah.
Under 100?
Well, I was on a phone call about this last week, and how many are approved as opposed to how many are in process, about 60.
Okay. And it probably covers where the top volume is.
It covers all of the top volume countries, yes.
Does that sufficiently answer your question? Good. Any other quick questions? Okay, well then we're going to wrap up for today. Thanks for the conversation about going global.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.